back to another episode of Inside Access Control. Very excited today to have Andrew Farah from Density. He's the CEO of a company doing some very, very cool stuff that I'm excited to bring to the listeners to get a taste of exactly what they're doing. So, Andrew, thank you very much for taking the time.
You're welcome. Of course. My name's Andrew, and I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of a company called Density. We build a system that can tell you how many humans are inside any room, floor, or building in real time without invading privacy. So we count people inside space, and we do so without collecting any PII or personally identifiable information. But in the access control space, we actually stop tailgating. So our primary function inside access control is actually identifying when two people have walked through a point of entry and only one badged in. And in about 300 milliseconds, we can set off an alarm, a notification, or some other type of security alert that essentially prevents tailgating through access control doors.
You look at access control systems where historically been about safety and security. Tailgating seems to always be a problem that not a lot of people have figured out because, again, I think it's just about keeping bad people out was the sort of idea. It wasn't necessarily data at the door and a real-time understanding of that. So now that's becoming more topical. It's one of the phase changes that we've been talking about. How have you seen adoption of that, I guess, or the concept and the idea around it? What are the conversations that you're hearing from your customer base for changes and things that they do want that maybe historically the access control systems haven't been able to do?
Sure. I mean, for what it's worth, I didn't know it was a problem. I didn't come from access control. I've never worked on access control when we first learned about it. We were approached by a CISO who said, I have tried every smart camera system under the sun trying to stop unauthorized access. And the false positive rate is exceedingly high. And so what I'm looking for is something that can accurately track the number of entrances. And then I can compare that with access control. So did I get a badge swipe at the same timestamp that I had an entrance? And at first I was super skeptical. I actually remember saying this isn't for us. Like, we do other stuff. Like, we count people for real estate teams and we help people with like workplace and whatnot. And they persisted. And so we have a real-time API and they put it above a point of entry. And as they actually had a circumstance where an employee walked through a point of entry on a Saturday, and right before the door closed at 10:15 at night, someone grabbed the door and walked in behind them. And about 10 days later, one of the teams found $20,000 in laptops stolen. And they have this all on video. They have this on the security footage. But the thing that was crazy was that the reason it took them 10 days was because they didn't have a system. They hadn't deployed Density yet. And they didn't have a system that could identify when tailgating occurred. Fast forward, today, we have essentially eliminated tailgating at their offices. And we're deployed in something like 22 different countries to assist in very secure buildings that are trying to ensure that they know when someone has not badged in. That issue is other employees. It's usually not nefarious. Usually one employee holding the door for another employee.
Right.
The problem is that inside your GSOC or your Global Security Operations Center or whatever security team is managing access control, they can't separate signal from noise. So they don't know which tailgating events are just another employee and which tailgating events are actually someone who shouldn't be there. Just some like offhand stats that are pretty staggering. About 40% of all entrances are unauthorized access. And we can actually prove it because now we have native integrations with all the popular access control systems. And so we actually have this like rolling dashboard that just shows security teams over the last 157 entrances, 62 of them were tailgating incidents. It's a really remarkable system. And then that kicks off a workflow for whatever the company's security policies or methods are.
Yeah, so it's bringing the awareness to the events in real time so that you can make decisions instead of having to go, back through video that you may or may not have even had to see if there was an event that happened. This can give you real time so you can make
often it's actually linked to the video. So it's really cool. You essentially have your own access control system. Then you have Density, which is sort of your people counting system. And then you have your security footage, security camera that's like looking at the door.
Okay.
And it's constantly rolling. We provide Density. We integrate with the access control system, and then we can link to your security footage. So in practice, what that looks like is a tailgating incident occurs, 300 milliseconds pass, we notice it, and then we push a notification to security teams with a link to their security footage. I'm sorry, my dog.
It's okay.
COVID work from home.
Everyone's working from home, so it's okay.
And that link will take you directly to the live footage So you can watch the tailgating incident occur in real time, and then it gets recorded and whatnot.
Very cool. Now, and I would guess on top of that, there's some other benefits and features that you can take to it. So this is just an example of something that is a security function, but then I'm guessing there's also occupancy understanding and, people flow type stuff. And right. So there's a continuous and added benefits to the having that awareness.
So if we were having this conversation 90 days ago, I probably would have told you that I would have talked about workplace experience, and I would have talked about employee productivity, and I would have talked about architectural design and how people are sort of like building buildings based on data that is anecdotal instead of based on actual hard data about usage. Today, the prevailing sort of feedback from most of the customers that we work with, which are predominantly the Fortune 1000, so we work with some of the largest companies in the world, is how do I bring my employees back to work safely?
Interesting.
And it's really straightforward. When shelter in place, post-COVID is lifted, how, when, and where do I bring my employees back? And how do we do it in a way that's safe? And I'll give you a few examples. There are companies who are removing furniture from conference rooms, specifically so it limits the number of people that can sit down. There are other companies that are getting rid of all shared desks because they don't want people to feel like they're going to show up and sit down at a desk that has been used by somebody who may be sick or ill. Other companies are doing the opposite. They're getting rid of all desks that are assigned so that they can have a clean desk policy where they clean the desk every night. Some are doing usage-based cleaning, and this is like fascinating. Instead of cleaning the parts of the building based on a time-based schedule, they're using density data to clean buildings based on usage, like actual usage. These tend to be essential businesses where employees have to go back, like right now. And then the one that I think is most interesting is actually essentially a COVID cap. So you set a target capacity for a floor or a neighborhood of desks or a space or a building, and then density essentially monitors the growth in headcount until you approach that threshold. And then we push a notification out saying it's probably not, there's not sufficient distance for you to be able to stay 6 feet apart. I think, and so we've actually conducted interviews with dozens of large customers around how they're thinking about bringing employees back safely. And I mean, it's just staggering. We have some customers who are like, well, we think we'll probably be back by July 1. This is a company that has 30,000 employees, 40 offices. And then 30 minutes later, I'll talk to another customer and they're like, to be perfectly honest, I'm mentally preparing for 2021 when I go back to the office. So I just think the entire industry is going through this massive change, I think, to your point, where some technologies that were irrelevant some period of time ago are now critical. And then other systems that were critical are no longer relevant until a certain period of time has passed. Yeah. And I think that's very interesting.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think it's also, I found some of the technologies that, for instance, we've been talking about frictionless access control and seamless access control up until 4 weeks ago. Now it's touchless, where it's the same type of technology, just applied differently in the way that the consumers are now digesting it, if you would, to be able to rationalize not a nice to have, it's now a necessity, essential technology, like you're saying, to be in there. And I agree. I think there'll still be a balance of tenant experience, but it won't necessarily be about ordering lattes and reserving conference rooms, which still probably will be there, but the buy of who's making those decisions, what drives them to make those, will be more of utilizing data to keep people safe, which is interesting because before it was a physical safety thing, right? Like tailgating was keeping a bad person from entering a space that shouldn't be there. But it was a physical thing that happened. Now there's like a health side of this, of our business, that wasn't there before. So like an awareness of understanding if somebody was recently sick or not too, from a visitor management system. You never would you have thought that needed to be part of it. So where now you do.
So I was actually speaking with a customer earlier this morning that specifically said they are going to be doing for early wave. So will be bringing employees back in waves. That seems to be relatively consistent. There remains to be sort of the outstanding question as to whether or not you bring back executives first, lead by example, or if you bring executives back last because they are sort of most business critical. I don't know. It sort of depends on the culture of the organization. I was actually, I heard one customer is actually doing antibody testing for early waves, specifically to be able to identify whether or not, your coworkers are are healthy. And then they're going to mandate any external visitor to sign a waiver that they hadn't been traveling overseas. They're going to take their temperature, and then they'll allow them into the building. I mean, it's just a whole new set of criteria and questions. And I think that the other thing that I'm particularly interested in also is like, it doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter all the things that a business decides. The space is, if a business decides a space is safe, that's only part one. Part two is convincing your employees that it is. Because if they don't want to come back and they're being just as productive from home, like, how do you make the case to know you must be in the office in the event that the employee cites a lack of safety as their primary concern? So it's not just the policies you implement, it's also what you communicate and how often you communicate to, sort of the confidence that you instill in your employee base.
I have a feeling too, some of the metrics that you track on what success looked like before will change as well, where productivity, so the outputs might be more important than butts and seats at that point. Where I've worked for an organization where, as long as you showed up and you sat in your seat, then you obviously were working. And this idea of now sort of a blended workforce where it doesn't matter if you're here or there, but you want it to be done safely. And the need again for data.
It totally depends the context in which this discussion is happening. So if you're watching this a year from now, there's a whole set of things that are going to be different. But given the current like state of things, I actually don't know if on-prem or cloud really matters at the moment. I think there are entire industries that are hibernating or completely being decimated. I think there are other industries that are going to survive, but they're going to come back. They just aren't going to be relevant for some time. Good examples of this are hotels, hospitality, airlines. It's going to take some time before those come back, but they're not going to die off completely. And then there's sort of this third category, which is those that can continue to do work distributed. And I think that the implications of companies being able to effectively do work productively distributed is actually going to have a huge economic impact on the business models of traditional access control. So a lot of these access control systems will sell you like your badge. And you're like, okay, for 24,000 badges, it's going to cost you X number of dollars per badge, and you have to replace them every 5 years or 4 years or whatever it is. Or we're going to charge you per head. Well, what if you don't actually physically show up to the office anymore? Well, all of a sudden, like, your business model is totally different. You've got a whole bunch of employees, but maybe half of them are no longer showing up to the office, which means, that customer account, the annual contract value or the total contract value of that customer is cut in half. I think these concepts of like unlimited users will become more likely. And then I would also just sort of generally say that for any company that's trying to figure out what to do for the next 9 months, if you're doing what you were doing 3 months ago, like, you're probably going to die.
Yeah,
if you're early stage.
Good luck.
Like, everything has changed. And so you sort of have to build from the ground up, like, what is true, and then how do you become countercyclical? Like, how do you become a business that grows faster in a downturn than it would in an economic boom? And I think that maybe the best example in our case is that we help you in our real estate side. We can identify the 40% of your real estate that's vacant but paid for. Like, if you pay us $50,000 or $60,000, we're going to give you roughly 10 million. It's sort of roughly tends to be sort of the math. Like, we can identify an incredible amount of wasted space so that you can consolidate, so you can save jobs and preserve cash. Previously, if we were talking about this, if we were having this conversation 90 days ago, like, the concept of workplace experience is gone for the next 9 months. And so I really think, like, what are the critical systems that are gonna be really relevant? And that's gonna be like safety, cash preservation.
Your company's ability to be adaptable as well, and basically shift on that end. I also think, though, what we're finding out from some of these companies are ones that are really good at storytelling as well, and seeing those opportunities and then being able to communicate those out. Because, like, right now, you've got basically everything is upside down, of course, and a lot of personal and professional pressures and societal pressures that are there. But the ability for people to see through all of that, to get a very crisp message around value creation that is relevant to the current of what's going on now, I do believe separates a lot of people, because there's a lot of machines that are out there that are still pushing the, I don't know, security from a physical security standpoint, keeping bad people out conversation, and haven't been able to pivot to the safety conversation around keeping people healthy and having awareness. And that's going to limit, I do think that could kill some people, the companies, and you'll see other people rocket ship out of that because they have the ability to tell good stories.
And it's also not bad. I mean, chaos is clarifying often. It's not bad there are so many great companies that were built in a downturn. And if you can figure out how to focus on the problems that really matter, as opposed to focusing on the problems that like feel like they matter because it's like everybody's buying, you tend to see some really creative invention. This is a side note, but did you happen to see the Hamilton YouTube video?
I did, yes.
That was amazing with
Yeah.
John Krasinski, where like,
Yeah.
you know, the girl couldn't go to Hamilton. And so the whole cast showed up and sang for her, like live on Zoom.
Yep.
You know, that humans capacity for creativity and invention, especially when there are constraints, is remarkable. And I think access control is going to be, you know, physical security and safety, or even just security and safety, I think is going to be no different.
I
Not
agree.
to mention you've got, I'm sorry, I keep monologuing, but
no, go ahead.
like you've got a, you know, 82 million humans in the US who are like work in an office, who are going to return to the office. That's never happened before at the same time. That's unprecedented scale. How do you provide secure access to documents or to prototype hardware? You know, if you're one of the big tech companies, if you're working from home, I don't know, but like security is about to become very important around like, how do you just sort of access and share information? And I think when those 82 million come back, the companies that have figured out how to do a really great job of one, actually keeping their employees safe, but two, communicating that policy and methodology to their employees will come back and they won't have any outbreaks. And those that don't will. And then those employees are going to churn because they don't, I mean, forget retaining employees because you know, you got a great culture and a really cool product and like you love your manager. Like you may not be able to retain employees because you've created an unsafe environment. Like that used to only happen in manufacturing plants. So
yeah, no doubt. This is why I like having these conversations, because, and actually I'm going to make a t-shirt around chaos is clarifying, because it's great, but it is, but like there's, and I like to do the mental gymnastics around what this could look like coming out of this. And as terrifying as it is on a daily basis of the unknown, the imagination and the creativity and the storytelling around what it could be, I think does allow for this to be seen as an opportunity, as well as I think we can accelerate out of it if we do some of these conversations to show that there's opportunity. And I'm thrilled to hear that the adaptability that you all have, because I've been a big fan of the work that you and your team have been doing from the beginning, from the way back when it was more about the privacy side and the people counting, to the tailgating end of that you have, to also then now driving the ability to bring a different layer of safety that necessarily wasn't, I don't think, known or appreciated before, but is definitely in the forefront. So I'm excited to see what you guys are doing.
can I mention one thing about Grocers real quick and
Yeah,
other essential businesses?
course.
Okay. I realize it's a little bit maybe further afield, but we have this product that will show you in real time the live number of humans inside of a space. So you can see whether or not, like, you know, there's 15 people or 25 people or 150. Right. And one of the things that we've seen sort of unprecedented demand for from grocery chains, and we think that this will extend to a lot of the corporate offices as well, is essentially like a red, yellow, green on overall capacity. So that COVID capacity that I mentioned before is sort of like, what is the maximum amount that is safe? Essentially a giant display that shows you like you may enter, or you need to wait. And right now, the way that this is done is with tally counters and radios all across the US in grocery stores, where you essentially allow one person in and you allow one person out, so that you can maintain with a tally counter. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so we sort of automate that process. But yeah, just like, you know, totally different reality today than it was 90 days ago.
It's exciting. Well, I could do this for hours with you, but I appreciate you taking the time. If people want to get a hold of you, find out more about what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
So just density.io is the best place to find out more. And I'm really responsive on Twitter or email or whatever else. I think, you know, generally speaking, we're interested in trying to share as much as we learn. So a lot of the interviews we're doing with customers now, we're going to anonymize and share. so that people can get a sense of best practices across different industry verticals.
Andrew, thank you very much. Be healthy and stay safe. And thanks for taking the time.
Likewise. Thanks.